friends, my name is Martinez and today I'll be sharing the 5 worst books that I read in 2021. First, I'll start with some dishonorable mentions. So they didn't quite make the list and I'll tell you why. Dune by Frank Herbert. I did not finish reading this. I DNF'd it and I read enough of a chunk of this that there is nothing that could have happened at the end of this to make me feel like it would have been more than 1 star. Like literally nothing could have happened for me to be like, oh, it'll be a 2-star because I hated the beginning of it so much, but I also just couldn't force my way through it. So I don't rate my DNFs. 1 star is I completed it and I hated it. Anything that I've DNF'd, I just don't rate. So in order to keep with my own rules, even though I know in my heart this would be a 1 star, I'm not officially keeping it on the list. At the beginning, I did have some investment in Paul and the Atreides, and I felt like the setup of it was pretty interesting, but as it went on, I could not get into Paul as a main character. I didn't have a lot of investment in him. And then on top of that, the writing style was completely not for me. It felt very overwritten, and the head hopping that we did was also super confusing, and we just explored every little thing from every angle, and Herbert spelled everything out. Before I started reading this, I had heard so much about people saying it's so complicated, it's so complex, people who don't like it don't get it, and I started reading it and I was like, are you kidding me? He literally spells every single moment and every single thing out. So don't get me started on I didn't understand it. I got it. Anyways, I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was overwritten. I didn't have any investment in the main character. And then also it's like super dated. Like hooray for what it did for sci-fi back when it came out, but I came to this in 2021 as a full-grown adult, and that meant it wasn't an enjoyable experience. It was full of misogyny and fat phobia and homophobia and racism, and like I do not owe this story anything, least of all my enjoyment. So I couldn't force my way through it. It was not for me. Probably will not try to get through it. The movie was fine. Also, as a dishonorable mention, this is more like of a disappointment for me personally. I went back and I finished reading Talia Hibbert's backlist, like of the things that I had not read yet. I really enjoyed Wanna Bet. I liked Guarding Temptation, and I really enjoyed her Ravenswood series. So those 3 things were great. I was middling on the first 2 books in the Brown Sisters trilogy, but I hadn't read Eve Brown. So I read Eve Brown. I went back and I read her Just for Him books, and I also read The Princess Trap, and they were all about 2 stars for me. It's like now to the point where I've disliked more of Hibbert's work than I've liked of her work. And so like this narrative that I have in my own head of like I like Talia Hibbert's work is now in question for me. So that was super disappointing. Does your girl like Talia Hibbert? 2021 said, probably, maybe not. And my final dishonorable mention is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I had heard all of the hype about Red, White, and Royal Blue by McQuiston. I've never read that book, but then they came out with like a new book and I was like, okay, I'm gonna hop on the train early on this one because I'm really excited to experience what a McQuiston romance is like. And I was super disappointed. I gave this one also like 2 stars, so it wasn't the worst thing I ever read, especially because the premise and the beginning and the setup really worked for me in a lot of ways. But unfortunately, that highlighted how bad things went from there. More than bad, how cringy the story became because of the different things that were set up that I don't feel like were explored fully, or that McQuiston didn't really like think through the dynamics that they were creating, specifically by having this white female main character and then a woman of color as the love interest, and having the woman of color be really passive in the story and set up to be like saved in a white savior-y kind of way. And then we had some like BIPOC supporting characters as well who sort of fade in the story and then enter into this very like providing wisdom to our white savior sort of role. So it all became very cringy from that aspect, but then also I didn't like where the plot went, and specifically a lot of the ways that the characters then became connected. I did not enjoy what that ultimately did for the story. This is one that I guess when I finished it I was like, okay, 2 stars, because it wasn't the worst thing I ever read, but every time I talk about it, it like sours in my brain and in my emotions, and I don't think about the experience very fondly. Okay, now we've made it to the actual list, and number 5 is Case Histories by Kate Atkinson. I picked this up specifically because I wanted to replace the Cormoran Strike series. I don't want to support that author anymore, but I really loved the literary, suspect-heavy, very wordy mystery that was. So I literally looked up like suspect-heavy mysteries and mysteries like Cormoran Strike, and Kate Atkinson and the Jackson Brodie series came up. So I was like, cool, I'll pick it up. And I didn't enjoy it. I did not enjoy this at all. It was astounding to me that so many people that I do know and like follow on Goodreads really loved it. So I read like 2 additional ones. I think I read 3 or 4 in total because I was like, maybe this gets better. Like I'm willing to invest because I want a replacement series. And it did get marginally better, but I kind of quit after 4. I don't know that I will ever go back and continue to read these. The entire like setup of these mysteries is that Jackson Brodie is a private detective and he ends up picking up a case, and then that case is usually tied to like 3 or 4 other cases. So we get like pieces or introductions to each of these cases, and then as we go on and he's investigating, we figure out how they're connected. And they're always connected in very contrivant and convenient ways, but like that's the whole thing, is that these are connected mysteries. Unfortunately, even though that is the thing, I did not enjoy them because it is so contrivant and so convenient and so forced at times that it became eye-rolly to me when we started to get the connections. I also enjoy in my mysteries like a larger level of investigation than this actually has. I can enjoy like cozy type mysteries sometimes where it is like a little bit more of a passive style, but for a replacement like mystery series, this was too passive. Jackson Brodie like barely does anything. He talks to people and like broods around, and then it's like mystery solved, and it didn't feel like there was actual investigation, which is not my jam. But the main thing that just made this incredibly painful to read was the misogyny that was just like baked in. I honestly, I kid you not that this happened. I was halfway through and I had to look up if this was satire because 1, like I said, I know so many people that loved it, and 2, it felt so tropey and it felt so like on the nose with its misogyny that I was like, is this making fun of itself? And I looked up, is Jackson Brodie satire? Turns out it isn't. The way that Jackson Brodie thinks about women was incredibly painful, and the way that all of the women are portrayed is just beyond me. I don't understand how a woman wrote this, honestly. I mean, I guess I do understand internalized misogyny. So this was just like not for me on the mystery front, like the elements of the mystery, but also not for anybody who doesn't like a heaping of misogyny with their mystery. Number 4 is Lore by Alexandra Bracken. We read this for House Salt this year and pretty much universally disliked it amongst the members of our book club. This was almost impressive in the way that it was the most fast-paced, boring thing that I read this year. You will note some similarities in my top 3 for a number of reasons, and one is that they're all boring. This one was also boring, but things never stopped happening. Unfortunately, it was the same thing happening over and over again in such quick succession that it felt like nothing mattered. I also thought that the world building was pretty flimsy, particularly because I didn't really understand like the parameters of this world. We set up the idea of these like mythological beings and these people like fighting and this family structures. You can tell it's been a while since I read this because also none of it stayed in my head, like that those are the bare bones of what I remember. whatever, but also like there was never any reason like why? Like why are we doing this? Why are we fighting? What are the parameters here? And Bracken did not answer that in any way that I found satisfying or that allowed me to like invest in the story or that allowed me to like invest in the stakes of the story. And then like the mythology, again, impressive because it was like super convoluted in the way that it was used, but also really, really shallow in its understanding of the mythology. Like the way that we see the Greek gods portrayed as like their most basic and shallow portrayals. And then towards the end, something that becomes super significant in the resolution is Lore's love of the city, but it's not built up in any way that feels like, ah, yes, her love of the city. It comes through in the end. It just came out of nowhere. It was like, Lore loves New York, ding, problem solved. And I was like, what? This also, you could tell that it wanted to bring up like feministy themes or vibes, particularly as they pertain to like Athena and Medusa, but then it abandons that as well, like because of the twist that it takes at the end. Like it tells you like things are not what they seem, and then there's a twist at the end that is like, oh, so things were exactly how they seemed. So your twist like undid all of the storytelling that you wanted to do, particularly with this theme of like women's empowerment. That felt really weird to me. Even as these details are like leaving my brain, the thing that I will never forget is the ending of this book, or more specifically, how angry I got at the end of this book. Like this was genuinely throw your book across the room sort of book to me. I was listening to it on audiobook, so I couldn't actually, but I wanted to. The way that the ending just did not fit the story at all, like the scope of the story and everything we went through for it to end as neatly as it did, as conveniently as it did, and in a way that felt to me, again, like undoing everything that we had just experienced. I was so mad. I am still mad. I am still mad about the ending of this book. It was messy before then, but the ending truly cemented it as like 1 star, no redeeming qualities, no thank you. I'm probably done with Alexandra Bracken. Number 3 is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. So we've got 20-year-old Persephone and everything about the setup of her life. Not that it didn't make sense, it just was so flimsy. She kept introducing things and then not following through, or just kept introducing all of these flimsy elements and like we were supposed to care, and they were so bad that they distracted from everything else. So for instance, she makes Persephone a journalist and then made her the worst journalist, and made the fact that she is a journalist like the driving sort of thing or conflict in the middle of this. But this girl would not know a fact if it slapped her in the face. It just was so distracting how bad she was at this. And then like I don't understand how we were supposed to take it seriously that she was like reporting and a journalist when I don't know. If you told me that Scarlett St. Clair had never read an article in her life, I'd be like, yeah, I believe that. And everything about Persephone's characterization, which I use loosely, made no sense to me because there wasn't a lot of consistency. Like it felt like she was supposed to be this badass female, but also throughout the whole thing, she just kind of like passively waits around for Hades to save her. And then she's supposed to be this journalist, but she doesn't actually like listen or investigate or anything like that. It felt weird to me, the series of decisions that she made. It didn't feel like we were getting a true sense of the character, and that goes for Hades as well. Like, what was his characterization? I have no idea. I mean, to tell you that the entire like story hinges on Persephone believing the worst in Hades, but that entire premise, flimsy premise, could fall apart if Hades just went, that's not the way that happens actually, but he doesn't do that. He just mostly stands there and says nothing unless it's time to be like growly and possessive and be like, mine about Persephone. Why these two get together? No idea. Was it supposed to be a slow burn? Totally wasn't. It was just like instant chemistry. I don't know, not even chemistry, because why were they attracted to each other? Again, it just felt like we needed to be behind Hades and Persephone banging and ask no other questions. Even if you go into this expecting erotica, not romance, I found those portions of the story equally as bland. And the pacing of it was really weird because, again, it's like almost instantaneously that they are together, but then it would be like back to back, like wham bam thank you ma'am scenes, like where it would last a line. And it was like, cool, you know, in, out, we came, he came, and that was the end of it. And I was like, this is what I'm sticking around for. But also, you guys know how much writing matters to me when I am reading a book, and the writing and editing here was not good at all. I believe this was self-published, or I read the version of it that was self-published, and it was just incredibly repetitive and just had like awkward phrasing and things that, had it been cleaned up, it would have at least not been as painful to read. But if you're asking me what is here to like recommend the story to people, I have no idea, because it isn't the writing, it isn't the cardboard cutout characters, it isn't the plot or like the world at all. And to me, it wasn't even like the relationship or the chemistry or the spiciness or whatever. So I didn't enjoy one bit of this. Number 2 was A Spanish Love Deception, and I kind of quibbled about which like was worse, The Spanish Love Deception or A Touch of Darkness. But I guess I read The Spanish Love Deception more recently, and I vividly remember how painful it was to get through. If you saw my vlog while I was reading this, I was like in bed at midnight, and I had to start recording just to express the pain that I felt while being trapped in the beginning portion of this story. This was also poorly written and poorly edited and so repetitive. Like, it felt like the author was just swapping out like angst or like chemistry between her characters with repetition. So it was the same thing happening in the character's head over and over and over again. To tell you that the whole thing is that like these work rivals agreed to fake date. She needs a date to a wedding, and that like conversation, like, okay, we're gonna fake date, and she's like, ew, no. That conversation happens so many times in the first 200 pages. I have no idea why we needed to agree to fake date like 3 times before I don't know, before the next part of the plot progression happens. This also felt really disjointed to me in the fact that it wanted to be like a workplace romance and also like this fake dating wedding thing, and they were like isolated. Like the first 250 pages was just going on and on and on about how much they didn't like each other, for sure, and they had like totally valid reasons for hating each other. So that like happened so much, and then it's like, oh yeah, we're going to Spain, and they get on a plane, and then just like Spain is the second half of the story. So it didn't feel very cohesive to me, and we just spent entirely way too long in the worst portion of that story, which is the beginning, where the main character is being dense and like, hey, why he couldn't possibly like me, little me, I'm just hot and awesome. Why could he possibly love me? Which, you know, is a romance thing, but for 250 pages, like, why are we doing that? And then the main love interest is stuck in the worst part of his story too, where he's just being like wooden and insulting our FMC over and over again. It was torture being in that for so freaking long. By the time we get to the second half of the story, which, by the way, we're building up that we're going to this wedding, and then we get there and we just skip completely over the wedding. There was no wedding to be seen. And so by the time that we get to the like portion of the story where he's like, oh, I was just being like super mean to you because it was the only way that I could interact with you, I was like, boo, too little too late, I'm over it. I couldn't even enjoy the book where like intellectually I could see that it was at least a little better than the beginning, but in my heart I was like, don't care. The other thing that I will mention is that this did a weird thing where our main character was like really into dieting at the beginning of this because she's going to this wedding, she wants to impress her ex, so she's thinking about dieting and losing weight a lot in a way that is very clearly like disordered eating, because she's withholding and then she's binging. So it is something clear to the reader that it is not healthy, and it gets thrown in there with a lot of things that are like fat phobic and just like never addressed in any meaningful way. It really felt like Armas was not trying to put this in her story. Like, it wasn't like she was trying to make commentary or make disordered eating a part of the main character's story. I feel like she just wrote about dieting, and as a consequence wrote in disordered eating and maybe didn't even realize it. I'm not saying that that's true. I'm saying that's what it felt like, because it was just so thrown in, then never mentioned again, and I was really uncomfortable. And number one, which you probably saw coming, From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Again, I was thinking, like, is this one really the worst of everything that I read? And I feel like it is. Like, I feel like it is, but even if it wasn't like the worst, the way that this lives in my feelings and the amount of hype that it got, like, compared to what it actually is, that whole combination is like, yeah, you're number one. You are the worst reading experience that I had in 2021. We'll start off with the same exact thing here. This was so badly written and poorly edited and so freaking repetitive that it was absolutely painful. I know a lot of people say that it's like candy, like it's super easy to read, but I just didn't find anything enjoyable about reading this. Like, I couldn't have a good time reading this because the writing was so bad. I feel like to enjoy this at all, you have to be skimming. You have to be jumping over blocks of text of the same thing over and over again, because if not, you're just stuck in this cycle of nothing happening in bad writing. I feel like people say that the main character is inquisitive as like part of her characterization, but what it actually is Armentrout is using like questions as a way of plotting out her plot in her book, because the main character spends like so much freaking time just asking herself questions in her own head, and I wanted to punch her in the face, because it would just be blocks of like, why was this happening, and what does this mean, and what if I do this, and what if I do that, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't have the answer to your questions, because we're not going anywhere, because you're just sitting here asking questions. If you don't know, I don't know, because you're the narrator. And so, and everything, even when we were in an action scene, she would like enter into these like situations, and she would just stand there and be like, oh, what's happening? Who's that? What's going on over here? And I'm like, why is this happening to me personally? The questions are made so much worse because she's just like so unobservant, and because the foreshadowing is so heavy-handed. Like, as a reader, you immediately know what's going on. Especially as she starts describing the main love interest, and she's like, weird, vibes are off, he's just suddenly appearing, his teeth are real pointy. And you as a reader is like, yeah, okay, like that weird, dark, mysterious man, I know exactly what's happening to him. But she's just like, what's going on? And I hated it. It was the way that this was laid out was really, really terrible, because you get this really intense, heavy-handed world building at the beginning, where a lot of it is just exposition in the way of like, you know, like a term, parenthetical, where you explain exactly what that term is. And then like that's all you get for world building, is just like all of this terminology and exposition, and then that goes away. Like the world building is like 50 pages, and then that goes away, and then the middle portion of this is just like a slog of like a day in the life of Poppy. We go absolutely nowhere. We do nothing. We just listen to her ask questions and like be treated really weirdly by this hot old man. But at least, I mean, I guess that's something of a characterization, because she's like super naive and like everything is sort of beyond her, except for she can physically defend herself, because, you know, strong female character. Hawk, on the other hand, who is the main male love interest, what personality is there? Please tell me, other than him being like a playground bully to this young girl, this virginal girl who has like seen 10 people in her entire life, and him like manipulating her, like I guess that's his personality. The entire setup of the relationship, like with fantasy romance, again, the whole like old powerful man and the virginal teenager is a thing, but this book is like the epitome of why it kind of sucks as a thing. I read a lot of urban fantasy and fantasy romance, and so like you kind of just have to accept that, but my favorites are the ones that like talk about it or like engage with it at all. This, on the other hand, is like a clear picture of why the power dynamic thing sucks, because she has absolutely no power. She doesn't know anything. She's never been exposed to anything, and he literally steps in to manipulate and take advantage of all that. And then at the end it's just like, it's fine. Don't worry about all of the lies that I told you to get you into bed. It will be fine. And then the cyanide cherry on top of this poop sundae is like the racism. The racist aspects. I laugh so I won't cry. So there are two major characters of color in this book. I know that we maybe meet more, according to From Blood and Ash fans who find my TikTok on a weekly basis. There are more characters of color later, but I only read the first book, so I'm reviewing and judging the first book. But we have the servant who serves Poppy and has to be her friend basically, and she's brown skinned and her name is Tawny. And we have the servant who serves the main male character and is like magically bonded to him and like has to give his life to protect this man, and only the rich Atlanteans get these magical bonded servants. And he has dark skin and his name is Kieran, which means little dark one. Whether intentionally or not, by malice or not, Jennifer L. Armentrout named her two characters of color brown and black. And people are like, favorite, love it. Oh, I hated every second of reading this. It is so bad. It is so freaking bad. And I'm just so over rewarding mediocrity. If you read or would like to read any of these books, let's chat about them down in the comments. Unless you're going to tell me that I didn't understand anything, in which case, keep it to yourself. Am I joking? She's feeling especially spicy today. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon with my favorites video, and I have 10 favorites. Bye! I can't be sad for you, Lore. You knew. You opened the book by telling us that you should not trust the gods, and yet here we are. So I know that I abandoned my 30 books in 30 days reading vlog. I have some footage that is unedited that will maybe see the light of day. So you guys don't know this yet, but I have a new puppy. This is Charles Bingley. And now you can't be mad at me for hating on these books because I showed you a cute puppy. How can you be mad? How can you be mad at this video when the puppy's on the screen? You can't be mad at the video. Cannot dislike. You can only like and share and comment and subscribe. Do it for Charlie. Do it for Mr. Bingley. Do it for Charles Bingley.